I was always rather keen on peace. I remember spending hours at a peace rally and 20 more extra minutes at the end having a vicious argument with a man who parked us in. I remember blissing out at a candlelight vigil, only to spend the bus ride home running through an angry and stinging argument in my head. An argument, incidentally, that never actually occurred. It's just that I was furious with the person and I wanted to get some burning put-downs and one-liners in my own personal mental space. I was a member of Amnesty, and I'd roll my eyes and sigh audibly at the person taking too long in front of me at the ATM. I could argue for hours about peace, and I did. But my mind and my heart were far from peaceful. And one day it occurred to me that perhaps the outer expressions of a desire for peace might also find some kind of more personal expression. I think it was shortly after I'd punched the laptop computer because the disk drive wouldn't come out fast enough. Thich Nhat Hanh, my great teacher, says that as we cultivate peace and happiness in ourselves, we also nourish peace and happiness in those that we love. As a grumpy, impatient, judgmental and unforgiving person, I was not contributing my own personal quotient of peace to the world, far from it. I expected others to behave peacefully in grand circumstances, but when I faced the small things, I figured it was okay to let off a little bit of steam occasionally. Except it wasn't occasionally. It was a way of life, an habitual response that defined who I was and how others saw me. So I decided to change, to nourish peace and happiness in myself so that I might be a source of those qualities for others. But you might be sad to hear that I have yet to approach perfection with all of this. Only yesterday I found myself bickering and finding fault with someone I loved, choosing to create a huge fuss over, wait for it, an esky that hadn't been cleaned properly. Have you noticed it's always the big things that bring up these problems, these blow-ups? I chose to make two people miserable over something that didn't matter at all. The academic and the popular exponent of meditation, Herbert Benson, urges people to stop trying so hard when it comes to cultivating inner peace. Sometimes the strain of trying to be peaceful can get us all hot and bothered and even angry. Instead, Benson says we simply need to sit with the word peace, 1, peace, 2. Our own mantra, and see where it takes us. We have to make room for our peace in our lives. It has to be allowed. We cannot force it. One of the beautiful teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh is that in his monastery the bell is never struck, the bell is always invited to be sounded. So we have to invite peace into us. Some people say that by making the decision to create a peaceful life at the most basic, small level, you are abrogating responsibility. I think that, on the contrary, acknowledging your role in being a peaceful person is essential to the creation of a peaceful society. It is, in fact, a complete acceptance of responsibility. If we are to love one another, it had better start with me. That is why it is good sometimes to come out of the closet as a peaceful person and to be held to higher standards of personal peacefulness. If you're going to hang that peace sign on your rear vision mirror, you'd better expect to be scolded by other people in the car when you start swearing at the person who cut you off in traffic. I once witnessed a woman in Vietnam shouting at two young men who had bumped into her on an escalator. She was really letting them have it. And she was wearing a glinting and diamond-encrusted image of Kuan Yin, the Buddhist goddess of mercy. The two young men had apologised, but she wasn't quite finished with her upbraiding until a little old lady came along and said, "Excuse me, madam, but I'd like to remind you what you're wearing around your neck." Spiritual cultivation, it must take place in public as well as in private. We prove the measure of our peacefulness in the way we communicate with others, the way we treat those closest to us and those furthest away from us, those far away in the geographic or ideological divide. Choosing the spiritual life and the spiritual approach to peace is not solipsism and it is not resignation. The great monk Thomas Merton referred to the spiritual life as a matter of keeping awake. The cultivation of personal peace makes us more alert to life's injustice, not less. We realise that we can no longer abandon things or leave them to chance. We recognise our own important place in the scheme of things, and we embrace it with enthusiasm and joy. I seek to be truly awake, not just to the faults of others, but to my own contribution to discord. I'm inclined to break into song. I did it recently at the Melbourne Writers' Festival. I had some very serious literary people in front of me, and I found myself singing parts of My Fair Lady. It seemed to go over well. I got this from my grandmother. She was a music-loving woman with a capacious memory, and she thought nothing of leading us through a rendition of Whispering Hope in the fruit and veg aisle at Woolies. We were like a tiny little version of the Von Trapp family. But I think she had a certain genius, because sometimes popular songs does it so well when we can't quite capture it ourselves. So I leave you with the first two lines of a country and western song from 1955, another great favourite of my grand's. And it goes, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." May you all be blessed.